tell you when. Hey, we're live. So, hello everyone. This is Jini with her name.
Hi.
And I'm really excited about this because Jini's book is it's a sort of like, it's talking a little bit of the DNA. I've now having read it, the sort of DNA of the we can do two. The DNA of the BPT, because what Jini was trying to seeming to discover through reading her book for me is that some kind of completely unmediated, no barriers engagement with the landscape, and like a child, and trying to rediscover that kind of childlike element of being in the land and reconnect with parts of us that we might not have done in our life. And so just reading the book it's just so well articulated, all this. And so we're going to have a massively wonderful journey around Britain. She's picked great places to talk about in her book. So okay, Jini, the first question I've got, and we've got Judith here saying hello Judith, there we go. So did it work? This quest you went on, not just writing the book, but the whole kind of personal journey, like you set out with a mission. Did you achieve the mission?
Yes, I did, but I kind of feel for somebody who may not be familiar with why I decided to write the book in the first place, I just wanted to share it because it's really important, because it came from an organic place. And I had been a travel writer for a long time, and on my travels I'd had opportunities to meet people from indigenous cultures. And I was really struck by the way that for these people, it was perfectly natural to enter into this reciprocal, reverential relationship with an animate, sentient nature. And I was fascinated by this and moved by this. And I wanted to know if it might be possible for somebody like myself, who wasn't a kind of land whisperer or a shaman, or well versed in the art of communicating with nature on a deeper level, if it might be possible for me to do this kind of thing. And so that's where the seed of the journey began, really. So that's how it started out. And I also felt that if I was going to do this, I wanted to really enter into the spirit of the endeavor, and I didn't want it to be an exercise for my mind. So even in the beginning, I set out to invoke the spirit of the land, even though I wasn't entirely sure what I meant by that. So I think I say in the book that I issued compass and map and tried to rely on my inner radar.
Yeah, that was the most radical thing about it. You're not following routes that are kind of pre-laid out like we do in a way. So it's led by your heart often, and led by the people you meet, it seems. And
the people that I met, I mean, it was almost like a trail of breadcrumbs. I would meet one person and it would lead to something else, or to a different place, and I'd try to keep attuned to signs and the unfolding of synchronicities. With pilgrimage, I mean, with the Pilgrimage Trust, I mean, I see on your site you talk about a ritualized walk, and I know you're not so crazy about that.
No, I love the word. It's great. Yeah. It's just the writ. I just don't like the sound of that. It's just more onomatopoeic. It's not. I think it's good. It's fine the way of discussing it. Yeah.
Okay. So for me, I mean, I'm really interested in a kind of setting an intention and a kind of conscious. I set out with a kind of conscious honoring of a place, and I think that's quite universal. And it's almost like when I talk about the art of deep listening, it's almost like a kind of silent dialogue I want to be having with myself and whatever might be present in the unseen that might be present. And yeah, just slowing down and opening up and wanting to receive wisdom, I guess, from what would I call it, the other, the divine. We have different words for these things, but I think language is really ill-equipped to talk about these things.
Well, that's why few people have done it, I think, and that's why I mean, I'm so grateful that you've done this, because it needed to happen. Then someone needed to write a book about the emotions of the search from it's a humble search for someone who maybe has admitted you don't know, you haven't done it before. Like, a lot of this stuff is new as you discover it, and so many people out there are in that situation. Like, they're kind of, this is, I wouldn't say it's a beginner's guide, because not everyone can articulate the way that you discover these things in the way that you can, but you do it. It's a sort of, you're helping people, I think, admit that so few of us are able to do all this stuff. And some of the people you meet are very unusual and not necessarily normal people. I mean, and so they're kind of this constant shifting between other and the concept of other in all its manifestations, and what's normal, and that kind of, oh, should I do this or should I not do that? I mean, we're talking quite abstractly. I think I should probably bring it back to kind of some basics. So, for example, like, just to give a list of the kinds of places that Jini went to in the book, like labyrinths, springs, holy wells, learning how to connect with prehistoric sites, like trees, yew trees, beech trees, all sorts. And then a traditionally Christian pilgrimage site, Iona and Lindisfarne, but then talking about those sites not based around necessarily the Christian tradition specifically. I mean, that comes into it just because it's there, but more about the landscape itself and what nature and why this place was chosen in the first place. So, and then learning how to talk to trees. Now, I think obviously we're getting into the realm of the other, and some of you will already be reacting to me saying that. But I now chastise myself if I meet an amazing tree and I sort of walk off and I've only kind of really looked at it and maybe touched it. But if I haven't sat with it and been with it, now, having read the book, I mean, so the book reminds me of so many things that started the Pilgrimage Trust, like the kind of the inspiration behind the Pilgrimage Trust, that is so much of what Jini talks about. But as time's gone on, it's become an organization. We're trying to make things happen. Actually, some of that connection with the kind of core I've lost, and so it's brought me back to the kind of kernel, the core of it. And I think that I love that. So yeah, so I'm just opening it up, and we hopefully you can write in questions, and we've got one from Dan. Here we go. Dan Broadbent said, I just started the book last night. Just the introduction rang so true to me. Exactly. So, Jini, there are a few things to talk about. So I think the other thing, let's just dive straight in with feeling other, and that can be loads of different things. And for me, feeling other is maybe I'm putting my forehead against an east wall of a church, and I'm feeling the stone, and then people looking at you, that's a bit weird. What are you doing? And also, even if they're not looking at you, even if you're sort of like looking around to see if anyone is, and that feeling stops you being yourself. And that's you deal with that all the way through the book in different ways. And I'd just be interested to hear what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think somebody said, put it very succinctly, there are advantages and disadvantages to our respective identities. So I think we all have experienced feelings of feeling other in different ways, in our own ways. And I think for me it was like, I've traveled widely, so it wasn't though it was some great daunting expedition into the British countryside. I love the countryside. I love being outside. I love being in nature. I love being in landscapes. But there was a sense, I began to see parallels. I was often the only Asian person I would see walking in the landscape, or I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me, and sometimes that felt a bit disconcerting. So I began to see parallels between, and it's not that people were unwelcoming; they were extremely welcoming. And I really felt as I really enjoyed my time, but I began to see that there were parallels between feeling slightly on the periphery of things, and this search for an other, which was on the periphery of things. This something I couldn't really define easily. When you're talking about the other, the numinous, the divine, the mystical, these do not belong to our rational world. So we're kind of it's kind of an act of faith, an act of trust to attempt to connect with these things.
Yeah, I feel this other thing. I think you do. For me, what I got from the book was this. It's a very subtle thing. It's not like someone being racist.
No.
It's more like you describe it as kind of a kind of glance, and the glance has meaning in the sense that, okay, I'm not sure that I can completely be myself, because the way that flick of the eye, it's not even necessarily even aggressive. It's just the very fact of being seen as different and being able to feeling like you're being seen as different makes you feel different, and then that makes you act different, and then that makes you start thinking about yourself rather than the land you're in, and it sort of sets off a chain reaction it started with nothing that aggressive, but the implications are big for it. And I think that was really like when you got to Iona and you wondered whether you should go to the pub or not because of the locals, how you'd be seen.
Yes.
That's a daunting thing for anyone going onto an island. I mean, locals are often a bit, and Cornish, and it's like but
yeah, for sure. I think the eye is drawn to difference anyway, and it can mean something, it can mean nothing. But I think when you're on the receiving end, it can feel a little disconcerting, and as you say, it can impact on what you do, and how free you feel. Like I didn't in Iona on the first night, I didn't go to the pub because I was I was too like cowardly. I couldn't, I was too afraid of what kind of welcome I might receive. And I had been on a long journey and I was tired, so I went to my room and I had my oatcakes and my apple, and I thought I'll face that tomorrow. But also generally, I think I really enjoy being on my own. I really love walking on my own. I love, partly because I'm slow and because I enjoy being slow, and I enjoy taking the time, and this idea of a ritual walk. I like walking in this way, and that demands that you be in a certain space, and it's not always easy to do that with other people around. I find.
I mean, just talking to someone else means that you'll get caught up in what you're talking about because that's only polite and the right thing to do. But it does mean that maybe it's almost rude to point to a skylark that you suddenly see, that because you're talking and they may be really earnestly mentioning this thing or talking about a particular thing, and then you go, oh, look at that sky. That's like, in certain conversational rules, that's kind of rude, but at the same time, it's also why you're there. So it's a kind of this kind of you're having to constantly balance all this stuff. Whereas if you're on your own, you can just you can do exactly what you want to do, look where you want to look, listen to which sound you want to listen to. It's pure. It's a pure experience in a way.
Yeah, and I can kind of enter into the space that I want to enter into. It's almost like I can do the kind of spell casting when I'm on my own in a way that I can't with other people around. There are certain elements, I want to be having this dialogue. I want to be speaking, metaphorically speaking to whatever is present in the landscape. And I feel that connection is harder to forge when you're with other people. It's a very intimate connection.
Yeah, because the land doesn't speak English. It's quite, as you described, with the trees, for example, what you learned from Glennie Kindred, about how you've got to be slow, sit by the tree for a while until you feel some kind of feeling of the tree. I mean, what is that? And then you might not hear anything but what she calls superficial understanding, and until a few minutes in or 10 minutes in or something. That if you're with someone else, you're having to balance your needs and your wants against theirs, which is right. I mean, that's also a great thing to do on pilgrimage: be with other people and be in landscape with others. That has its own, but they are like kind of completely different experiences, and it's worth people knowing that.
Yeah, I've not really experienced that. So what would you say is the difference? I mean, what are
Well, it's just I suppose it's the content of what you experience in the landscape. So, I mean, just the act of walking alongside each other, not looking at each other straight in the eye, and just having some kind of shared purpose or destination or route, means it opens people up. So the kind of quality of conversation can be really of a level of the lack of drawbridge of secrecy. It just there's more of a porous. It's more there's less kind of barriers often in the discussion, and you can really talk about all sorts of things. And also you can just walk, one person walks in front, and then there's a kind of rhythm, and you may not talk for a few minutes. Whereas if you're having coffee with someone statically in a cafe to catch up, if there's a big silence, it's a bit weird. But in the landscape, it doesn't really matter, because you just go silent for a few minutes until the next comment naturally comes up. So I think as a conversational tool, I think it's an amazing thing. And to be in the landscape, and the fact you've got things to talk about, it's changing all the time. It's really great. But if you're on your own, if you have some kind of sudden upsurge of joy and emotion or something, and you want to start singing, for example, or like, you can just do that. You could be on your own and just you could be shouting and having a lovely time. Not that I do this, but I think my experience of this was when I walked. It was my first ever experience of some kind of walk that was a bit more than just scenic walk. Was walking from the source of the River Cam to Cambridge in a day, which I think is like 25, 30 miles or something in a day, which I now know is insane. But and it was too much. But there were moments in the day where I was having kind of strange conversations with myself, and slightly going mad in a way, but at the same time, total freedom, and I might just suddenly have this really joyful experience, and nothing would stop the flow of that enjoyment, and it's kind of blissful.
Yeah, I think it was in the chapter to do with the oracle, the labyrinth, and I think I wrote something like there were no put you in a box eyes, so I had the freedom to go in whatever direction I chose to go in, or I could stop when I wanted to stop, or I could do nothing if I chose to do nothing. But I guess the flip side of that is there are like 1,000 tiny decisions you have to make for yourself. And they become incredibly significant.
It's such a weird. That was one of the things you said that was a kind of throwaway comment, but actually, it's a big thing. Suddenly you're on this beach in Lindisfarne, and which path you go down, or which side of the beach, or suddenly it becomes like this big thing, and it's not a big thing in a sense, like from an outsider's perspective, but because you're really in the zone of loving being in this landscape, and also this kind of idea of wanting to have the best experience you can.
Exactly. Yes.
The high pressure that one puts on themselves, like, especially if it's someone's first pilgrimage or first trip to a sacred destination like that, the pressure that you put yourself under to have this really meaningful experience actually means that it's good in a way, because you may actually have more meaningful experiences than you'll have once you become a kind of veteran, and you become a bit almost like blasé, because another pilgrimage route you're doing, whatever. But so that it's like that beginner's kind of open wide eyes, and
which is the original pilgrim spirit, really.
It's amazing. And I love. And do you still have that? I mean, is that, or has it been a while since you've done this kind of thing? I mean, have you picked it up?
I mean, I'm not going on journeys in the way that I am I did, in a very focused way in the book. But I think I realized I kind of do this as a matter of course. I think I'm always having that silent dialogue when I go walking anywhere, and I'm always trying to I love this idea of wonder and magic. I'm really drawn to this idea of trying to bring in some kind of wonderful synchronistic experience, a sign. And so I do tend to, walk in this way, but not always. I mean, sometimes it's just a walk, and this sits alongside, I think you can do this. For me, I do this, but I'm also very conscious of the physical, tangible beauty of a landscape. You know, I'm experiencing that too, just like anybody would. But I do think there's a certain, you can conjure a kind of magic with your intention, and by wanting to communicate with this.
Yeah, that and somewhere it says, I don't know, on the blurb or somewhere else, you're not interested in the mythic landscape or the mystical, but more the magical. And obviously, I thought when I first read that, I was like, oh gosh, this is some kind of strange academic distinction that you often read about in these kind of journals and things that, you know, they argue over the words. But actually, I think you only actually fully explain it right in the last chapter, once you've gone through the whole book and you sort of start to really unpack what you meant. And I think I finally got it, which is that the mystical or the mythical side is more like stories, belief systems, kind of handed down societal stuff. But the magical is like more having a direct, no knowledge required relationship with the land around you. And it's like, it's not abstract at all. It's all about what you're experiencing with your eyes, with your ears, with your spirit, everything. And that's, there's less of a gap. You don't have to do as much work to get to that point, but you have to strip away stuff rather than add things. And I think
that is so beautifully put. I would say that for me, there's kind of a distinction between the magical, between the mystical and the mythical. So for me, the mystical and the magical are, as you say, this kind of something you can enter into quite easily on a personal level without having to know everything.
It's I mean, I found this for me was life-changing because I needed to I was sad when I got into when I first started the British Pilgrimage Trust. I was at a real crossroads. I'd finished a PhD. I wasn't enjoying that too much, and I was a bit lost. And then I met Will, who said, let's take this song back to where it came from, walking along the River Medway for a week. And he introduced me to the yew trees and the campfires and bathing in the river. And I could start to feel after that journey that I was sort of healing. That's whatever was the problem was starting to go away. And then I think I realized when I was really kind of on the mend, what had happened was that I'd reconnected my 5-year-old self to my 6-year-old self. That I used to buy like young ornithological magazines and bugs magazines and insects and birds and all and nature. I was really into that at that point in my life. And I would walk into the landscape and see it in this amazing way, like the kind of magical way you talk about in the book as an adult later on. But I'd forgotten about that. And I think reconnecting with that was kind of what made me, and you know, it's weird to be, I'm now in my mid-30s but that 5-year-old self is still the one that really counts, you know, and that's something. And I felt that's when you read the book, that's what you really are connecting to.
It's the playfulness and entering into things in a spirit of experimentation and not needing to be an expert. But also I think I was thinking about this yesterday, and I thought, like, maybe there's some vital part of our consciousness that is awakened or activated when we go and we do these things, and that's why it's so nourishing.
Yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it? How does this happen? But also in relation to place, and this is something that came out, is like you described Lindisfarne as having a kind of, the nature was generous, that the kind of landscape was generous in its spirit. And I know I've been to Lindisfarne. I know exactly what you mean instinctively, but it's quite hard to actually, what on earth does that mean? And then when you're I haven't been to Iona, and you make me want to go to Iona so much. And this idea of the 3 billion year old granite as being somehow related to the fact that this particular place is able to make you feel very very healed or connected, and that is interesting, isn't it? That the idea of landscape and place really does matter. You'd make this big long journey, 12 hours to get there, and it really matters that you can't just, someone's just actually asked this question I wonder if you can encounter the sacred as easily in non-natural landscape. That's obviously like a big question, but you've made all that trip to go to Iona, and that it's a funny one. In a way, you shouldn't have to go to a special place to feel
I don't
special.
think you have to. I don't think you have to at all. I think it's a really great question, and I think it's all about creating. You can create that space wherever you are. It's the intention that you carry. You know, it's not just about a natural landscape. It could be an urban landscape, could be in your living room, it could be wherever. I mean, it's all about creating a kind of intention, and yeah, it's more of a conscious mindset that you bring to something.
Yeah, we do London pilgrimages. One of our most popular ones is from the Tower of London to Westminster Abbey, and we call it the London Royal Route, or the Sovereign Line. You know, this concept of connecting to the sovereign, and obviously those two places are connected with the royal family and our crown of. In a way, it was seen as the crown of the land at the time of the Tower Hill, and that's why people were beheaded at the top of it. And you know, these kind of stories, and the mythical Trojan kings of Ludgate and Billingsgate, and they're all named after these extraordinary kind of godlike deities. And once you and if you think of stripping away like the urban, like all of these lands, these skyscrapers and massive churches, and all, if you imagine the land as just the land underneath it, and as you're walking, you start to feel London in a way that's you're really feeling that you know that there's a river running under you at one point, let's say, because there are quite a lot of underground sacred rivers in London and just pointing that out kind of starts to awaken a certain way of being in the landscape. Yeah,
I do think you don't actually have to be outdoors or in a special place or a sacred place. You know, these are almost human projections. You know, we decide a place is sacred or isn't sacred. And therefore we're more open to feeling something, I guess. But I believe it really doesn't matter where you are. You can create this magic for yourself anywhere.
Yeah, there's that awkward truth that obviously places like Iona have some kind of precedence, and that they have been tried and tested over thousands of years as a place that's worth going to, and that people think, and that, so it's a tricky one, isn't it? It's like
a tricky one. I mean, the caveat is that I absolutely love. I would rather be in Iona than being in a department store trying to create a sense of the sacred in a department store.
Yeah.
You know, but I think I think we can't discount that the possibility. You know, the possibilities exist wherever we are. I really believe strongly that our mindset has a lot to do with it. I've gone for walks in the countryside with people who seem not to even notice where they are, and you know, there's very little connection going on. Whereas I may have sat somewhere in a London park or a London cafe and had the deepest connection with somebody in the deepest conversation.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It's where our mind's at the end of the day. What really counts often.
Yeah, but I mean, what happened in Iona for me was my favorite chapter in the book, and I went up. As you know, I don't know if you read the whole chapter, but I went up there without any plan, and the idea was try to see if the land would guide me somewhere, to see what would happen. And then as I was on the train going up, I got a message from somebody who said, if you're going to Iona, you have to see if you can find the Temple of the Glen, or Glen Temple. And so I was so excited because I felt I'd been gifted with this mission. And then I got to Iona and I spent 4 days trying to find this Temple of the Glen. And every time I asked somebody, I felt there was this resistance, and I felt that I was being thwarted. And then I gave up. And then on the last day, I gave up and I decided just to enjoy Iona because it's just beautiful. And then on the last day, I met this woman in a cafe, and I realized, a woman I'd met 3 years earlier, and I told her about this quest, and she said, well, why don't we try to find this Glen Temple together? And I said, okay. And then as we left, She bumped into a woman that she knew and hadn't met for a couple of years, and this woman was going on a walk, and as it happened, she was going to this Glen temple, this temple of the Glen, and I found this extraordinary. Like the synchronicity of it was extraordinary.
But before that had happened, in those 3 days before, you'd basically resigned yourself, as it were, to just spending time on a beach, or just spending time, or just not necessarily doing loads of stuff when you were there. I mean, you gave yourself a week, so you gave a nice amount of time to.
The first 4 days, all I did was try to find this temple or talk to people who might tell me where it was, and it felt like these doors were being shut in my face, and then I gave up, and then I decided to just be with the island. And just
and that's what I suppose that's what I meant. The moment of giving up and just releasing, that was the lesson you needed, or maybe needed to learn. I don't know if that's this interesting, isn't it? This needing to learn. The language of morality does come in to landscape itself, and it's like, I think a lot of what people are put off by religions and belief systems and stuff is that you kind of, there is a way that is decided that is the way to be, and I suppose some of the questions you ask actually are like, what is the land teaching me about how to be? Which is quite an unusual question. It's like, and the morality of the landscape, like this search for this place on this island, suddenly is starting to teach you about yourself and your what you're trying to discover. You're trying to discover things like letting go, like giving it up, and then it will come. That's a pretty deep spiritual lesson that a lot of people know, that you only really get what you want once you've let go of wanting it. But you have to want it in order to be able to let go, in order to get it. So it's really complicated. And so I love reading. I love reading that kind of journey you're going through inside, and that's what you're bringing in. Is these inner discussions you're having with yourself are massively important, and yet they may never get known by anyone else as you're walking around. It's like, it's really special. Okay, right. I'm going to think of a. So okay, St. Helens Spring. It's really cool because I've actually been to most of the places in the book that you're talking about. So that was really nice to see someone really interrogating the experience. And also I'd spoken to Mark Golding, and I'd got the map too, and I'd read the story, and it's the same kind of thing that you'd experienced, you'd had. And I was with Will. We were doing our Winchester to Canterbury along the South Downs route, and we just done about 15 miles in that day, but we really needed to walk another 15, which is actually quite a lot to do in a day. Maybe it wasn't quite as much that, but we finally found the spring, and I just got in. I just got naked. It was like it was winter. It was like about 5 o'clock. It was going dark, and got in, and it was incredible experience. I mean, it was just like, it's the best spring I've ever been to, and I've been to lots of holy wells, but it is like, it's the most special one. It's in Hastings, and it's a very unexpected place. And it's extraordinary, isn't it? Like, what is going on? Why are we going to these water places, and what is it about that place, do you reckon, that does make it very special? And yet, I don't know, is it the story that you read beforehand? Is it the map, or is it the actual place, or is it, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I asked myself the same. If I had just stumbled upon it, would it have had the same impact on me, as opposed to being presented with this treasure, beautiful hand-drawn treasure map, and wanting to find it because it was on the map. And initially not being able to find it, walking around for 3 hours with a friend in the rain, and then going back a few months later, and everything clicking into place, going back on my own, and everything clicking into place, and the hair standing up on the back of my neck, and then finding it. And like you, although I was probably a little bit more hesitant about stripping off, I'm not really a skinny dipping kind of person, so I was a bit hesitant, and but then I had to. It was the kind of place where you had to do this. I felt compelled to do this, but I think it's a bit of both, really. I think there's something there. I felt that there was something there, but how do you? Is it the same for everybody? I don't know. I mean,
it's a perennial question. Is it the land, or is it the human practice that has happened in that place, or is it the stories that we tell about that place, even if they're not true, like Tintagel and some of the stories around Glastonbury and Avalon and stuff? They are quite extraordinary stories. And are they true? Does it even matter? They are true because we're thinking it and we're connecting it. So it's like saying,
but I do know that the day that I did find the springs, I woke up feeling very upset about something. I was emotionally very upset, and that day I really needed to feel healed. So I almost feel that it was a gift of the spring.
Yeah.
Helped me find it that day, because the minute I plunged in and came out, I felt completely transformed.
My mum once said to me, like, I was going through exam anxiety, and she just said, just go and have a shower and let the water wash away all of your feelings. I was like, well, that was way before I discovered pilgrimage or wells or anything like that. But that concept of water being able to sort of take away all your fears or your anxiety and just letting it flow away. Like, I've often thought about that. And water is just, these places are very special, and they do make a difference. And it's like you were saying how your DNA was changed after sleeping on Lindisfarne. Like you said in the final chapter, I think you fall asleep and you wake up and there are these people around you, and then
Yes.
yeah, and then you feel like you've been changed by that experience. I kind of know exactly what you mean. I slept. Actually, I'm not allowed to say it, so I'm not going to. I held myself. God, that's good.
I'm intrigued now.
No, maybe another time. But yeah, no, I think this concept of like you sleeping in a place and your actual being is changed by it, and your soul or something it all sounds a bit strange, but it feels really real.
Oh yeah, I mean, the first chapter in the book is about my experience up in the Pyrenees, where I did a kind of version of a vision quest, and I was wild camping and fasting on my own for 5 days and 4 nights, and I mean, talk about you know, entering into a space where you become very close to the land, and the kind of the veil kind of slips away between your nature and the nature out there, and that is hugely transformative. And I think we can't all spend days and days, or we may not want to spend, several days alone fasting up a mountain. But I think there is something of that essence when we go on any kind of pilgrimage.
Well, fasting's really interesting. I mean, I've done a 5-day fast, and like at the end of the third or fourth day, like I find it's very hard to get out of bed and actually physically move your body around. That's quite difficult, but your mind and your spirit feels massive, and it feels really, really constant. I mean, you can work really hard. I felt very clear-minded, and on some level, you're closer to being spirit, I guess. And I guess that's what happens when people die, and when they fast and then they die. They're kind of by not eating, by not putting matter into your body, you're starting to become like gently a sort of spirit and float away. And but so Vision Quest, that is very interesting. Did you do much walking when you did that, or was that just?
No, because I didn't have the energy.
Yeah,
I mean,
the
idea was to stay, in this space around my tent. It was on a kind of conical peak with a flat top, like a witch's hat upside down. It was a peak on a peak in the Pyrenees, and so no, I had no energy to move around. I basically sat still, and the first day or two it was really hard. But then, like you say, I love the way you say that you just become more spirit.
Yeah,
incredible, nourishing feeling.
Yeah, I once read in a book like matter is condensed light, and apparently that's actually true. I think it was a physicist who was saying it, but if that is true, then kind of it's just matter is just a denser form of something that is actually quite spiritual, and so okay, right, we got a question here. Iron and Lindisfarne were founded by monks from Ireland. Iona first, Columba then. Yeah, that's true. They are very connected. Ireland is full of pilgrimage routes and sites. I know. I'd love to go to Ireland. Is basically what this makes me want to do. But the only issue is we started this thing called the British Pilgrimage Trust, and there's a lot of work to be done just in Britain. And you were talking about the Pyrenees, and there are all sorts of places in the world I'd like to go and do this, but really Britain is just there's so much to do, and I feel that it's my duty to really get to know Britain, because I know that Ireland is incredible, and a lot of people say that the holy places are extraordinary in Ireland, and I really, really would like to go, but I haven't myself. Have you, Jini?
Yeah, I did go to, so I was in Connemara once on a hiking holiday, which was kind of the antithesis of pilgrimage, because we had to climb 5 mountains in 5 days, or 5 peaks in 5 days. And I found this incredibly strenuous. And on the second day, the sole of my boot fell off close to the peak of one of these mountains. So that was very stressful. But there is a walk, I think it's Crowpatrick.
Crowpatrick, yeah.
And so I did that, but not barefoot.
I like Crowpatrick. That's a classic. Yeah. No. That's the reason why I at least don't know much about Ireland, is because I only came to this when I was 28, and I'm now 27. I'm now 34. So it's all been quite new, and I was a novice then. So it's like there's been so much to catch up with just with Britain, getting to know.
I love Ireland. I love the spirit there. I really enjoyed my time in Ireland.
I think they are much closer as a people in general to the kinds of ways that you talk about in your book. I think it's like you would be able to speak, and people would just get what you're talking about more. I think that's the vibe I get. I'm not sure, but I think I just get the feeling it wouldn't be so strange to talk about some of the things you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to know a little bit about tree whispering, because actually I did read a book by Glennie Kindred when I was before I got into pilgrimage, and I think it was on trees. But what are the kind of main takeaways you got of like how to speak with the tree?
I have to be honest. I would say, and I wrote about it in the chapter. I think I struggled a little bit with that one. I think maybe it was because the day we went, it was very overcast, and I wasn't feeling particularly inspired. But I think the idea is, I think it was consider how the tree might make you feel and what you sense around it. And you kind of like a kind of free jazz riffing, I guess. Whatever you feel is don't deny it, because they mean things. They have meaning. Like there was one tree, and I can't remember which one it was, and to me it felt really spiky and antiseptic. And Glennie said, yes, that's true. That's very reflective of the tree's nature. And that was just an intuitive thing that I'd felt, and which I was slightly afraid of voicing.
It's really weird with intuition, isn't it? Sometimes you feel these things, and then you think, should I say that? That's a bit weird, isn't it? But then if you say it, then I don't know. It's what you're feeling then. I mean, a lot of what you talk about in the book isn't exactly scientifically provable. That's not really the point. It's like,
oh no,
yeah, it's not the point at all. It's well, it's interesting about not necessarily feeling connected. One of my most friend when I was at university doing my PhD, he was very, very rationalist and didn't believe in any of this kind of stuff or felt any kind of connection to it. But he would often just sit by this one tree on Grantchester Meadows and just and do a lot of his thinking sitting next to the tree. And I think that's a thing, people sitting under trees to think or to feel or to read a book or something. And there must be something going on, otherwise why would people do that?
Well, in my neighborhood, at the end of my street, is a woods, and there is an ornamental plum tree, or there used to be. And I would go there, and I was going through a very difficult year before I wrote the book, and I would cling on to this tree, and like when nobody was around, I had to be careful. I didn't want anyone to see me doing this. And I would cry against this tree, and I literally would go to this tree for support. I mean,
yeah, it's strange, isn't it? Well, they're very old. I mean, they've survived a lot longer than most of us, and and that can often be one of the reasons. They're so old, and they time moves slowly, and it's quite safe and secure and calming.
Yeah.
So we've got a few questions coming in. I'll go through all the sort of the nice comments. Thanks for this discussion. Well, thank you for listening. Really enjoying a conversation. Thank you very much, Marina.
Thank you.
Fasting is synonymous with the 3-day, I'm not going to try and say it, County Donegal pilgrimage. And here's Caroline's reflection: listening to this on my way to help my brother, whose wife is in the last stages of cancer. Oh. Yeah, reflecting on something bigger than yourselves, at least makes you might feel that the dogs and your brother, and they are in a way being absorbed into this wonderful thing that is the land, and it's sort of welcoming them back in, and that's a lovely way of thinking of it. Yeah.
I just wanted to say something in relation to that, because in the book I went to a couple of places with my friend Mandy, and she had cancer at the time, and she died a few months ago. And one of the last conversations we had, she was talking about how meaningful she found, the times we'd spent together doing these walks in the landscape, and that really stayed with me.
Yeah. So it was your experiences with her that really, in the landscape, that kind of made you kind of come to terms with it on your own personal basis. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think well, it's just I think
quite hard to talk about. Okay. Okay, Gary, any sort of pilgrimage or even just a walk in the wood is important. Yeah, no, this is an interesting thing. It's like one of the things that happens when you walk outside for days on end, especially if you're finding places that are legal to wild camp. Obviously, we, as the British Pilgrimage Trust, we can't recommend that you do wild camping. It's not actually legal. But if you do spend your whole time outside for a long time, this nature immersion experience starts to happen. You start to feel like you're going back to becoming a kind of animal or your primal self, because you're not inside. There is something about being inside that protects you away from that feeling. But if you don't ever have that feeling, I think you've missed out on something in life. It's not like you have to always be outside for like the rest of your time, but a few days being outside, and you'll start to feel different.
Well, we are the human aspect of nature, so it stands to reason that when we are in nature, we become expansive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah. So in the chapter about walking blind, that was really interesting, because that so much of what people consider hiking and normal walking to be is about going the route with the best views, or like and scenic, and it's all about the visuals. That's the language that's used a lot. But if you actually remove that ability by actually just closing your eyes and having someone guide you, is that something you do much of? Did it draw you, or did you?
I was curious because as a writer, as a reader, everything I read is written by people who talk about the landscape in visual terms, and it just got me thinking. And I met a woman who is a guide for the unsighted in the landscape, and I wondered what it might be like, how I might experience the landscape.
It sounded from your description that everything became amplified. It's like a kind of branch across your path suddenly became this sort of gargantuan, sort of serpent-like kind of monster, and then and a small footpath actually. So you felt like you're in this deep, dark wood, and then actually it was just a kind of clump of trees. And
yeah,
when you opened your eyes again, so there was a sense that by closing them, your kind of your experience expand.
I felt that I was pulled in. I was pulled into myself. And the interesting thing is I can still very clearly remember those experiences. far more than I can a regular hike where my eyes are wide open, which is interesting.
That's interesting, yeah.
And little things like, I could hear, a bird, the wings flapping by my face, and I felt that acutely, or the sun on my eyelids.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a sense of the space, like the landscape, the rolling hills. That all disappeared.
Because people who are blind often say that they completely that they can use the sounds of a place to really know the spatialization of it all. So it may just be you're just not very practiced at doing that.
Well, I mean, in talking to Karis, who was this guide, there's a danger in romanticizing. Suddenly your senses other senses take over, but also there are challenges. Walking unsighted. It's easy to trip and fall.
Yeah.
You don't suddenly become this all-sensing creature. I think there are a lot of challenges too, and I think they need to be acknowledged. But I think your perception of what landscape is changes. It becomes much more of an inward thing, a kind of interior landscape that you're creating, I think.
I was just thinking about how I could bring this into a guided pilgrimage. And I was thinking if we walk through the wood, we could have, like, if it's a group of 25, then everyone could put their hands on each other's shoulders and slowly walk along the path with everyone, the people at the front, like looking out to see what's coming next. And that could be a bit dangerous. I'm not sure. I've never tried it. But the idea of a whole group of people with their eyes shut, that might be a really amazing experience. I don't know, and just for a few minutes. It doesn't have to be the whole journey. But
well, when I walked with Karis, I did have my hand on her shoulder, and we had this kind of this technique, which was interesting.
Yeah. So you just talking a little bit about the St. Michael's Way pilgrimage, because that was the chapter that related to the British Pilgrimage Trust explicitly. It was a route I think that Will designed and then wrote up, and I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't walked it, and it's just suddenly then you walked it, and then I was reading about it. So like there were lots of stories like giants throwing stones, and it is quite an amazing part of the landscape. And you're going between coast and coast, so it's got a lot going for it, a day route. What were your kind of experiences of that? Was the only pilgrimage that you did, like, in terms of an actual walking journey, wasn't it? So.
Yes, yeah. First of all, I loved the route notes. I thought the route notes were brilliant. And they were really interesting, like really interesting stories, little stories, and they've been very well written, which may not seem like a big deal, but it actually was. It really lent itself to the experience.
Yeah, I think Will wrote those, but I don't know whether he's actually walked it, which is even more extraordinary. He might have done. I don't know, but
that's interesting. Yeah, I think I was expecting, because it's I think it's officially a part of the Camino, and the scallop shells. You see the scallop shell at the start of the trail, and so I was expecting there to be lots of pilgrims walking this trail, and that there'd be this kind of camaraderie, and we'd all sort of like nod to each other. And it wasn't really like that. It was myself and my friend Olivia, and we were trying to get into this space, create this kind of magical space for ourselves, and then just be people yomping past.
Yeah, I know. It's weird, the yompers, aren't they? The yompers are hard to handle, the yomping.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter.
Walk past, and I think I felt that they had this aura of national trust and rosé wine, and but
which actually, to be honest, just it is fine to be like that sometimes, because this sort of uber sensitive, deep listening. Sometimes you just want a burger. Or do you know what I mean? Like when you're eating food rather than having that Michelin star.
I don't want to be precious about it, because I'm that person too at times, but for the purposes of that particular the context, we were in this kind of mystical pilgrimage, Camino kind of experience. But what happened on that route is that we became very attentive to everything around us in a way that I don't think we would have done otherwise. And I think there was one little ritual where it was in the notes where you took some water from this hidden well somewhere, and we spent 20 minutes scrabbling around trying to find this, and then we found it, and it was a fantastic experience. And the minute we found this, we made some kind of offering as per our pilgrimage notes, and then I looked up in the sky, and there was this bird of prey flying around us, and it felt like a response.
Yeah.
And that could have just been, coincidence, but it felt really meaningful in that space.
Yeah.
And so we followed this route right to the end. And I remember there was an issue with time because my friend was very fast and I was much slower. But we managed to get to the causeway to St. Michael's Mount at exactly the time that it opened, which I thought was extraordinary.
Yeah, the idea, because a lot of land stuff is to do with, space. That's the dimension you're often talking about. That you go from here to here to there, and then you experience place and that. But there's this time element, isn't there, as well? This synchronicity. So you don't know, and traditionally, like making pilgrimages, you do it at a certain time of year that are seen as more powerful than others, and maybe your birthday, or a festival, either a pagan festival or Christian festival. They're often the same anyway, and those kinds of things like make a difference. Or maybe like St. Columba's Day, you walk to Iona, let's say. But this intersection of time in your book is more relevant to you. It's like the land starts to kind of work itself around your particular experience. So, and it's like the ultimate kind of like, yeah, look at me, like it's like the whole world is conspiring for me to have this moment right now. And it's quite amazing though, but you do feel very embraced by that when these things happen.
I think it was interesting because we did this pilgrimage walk, and the reward for it, I felt like we did the work. We kind of gave ourselves to this walk. We were honoring it, and then the next day we received our reward. We had this unexpected occurrence, and it was almost like you do the work and then you have this wonderful experience at the end of it. But
the BPT was kind of founded on a synchronicity, actually, because we were taking this song back to Heart Lake Bridge. It was the Heart Lake Bridge tragedy song, and then when we got to Heart Lake, the monument in the parish churchyard at Hadlow, there was this couple standing in front of it, and they were there for only 5-10 minutes, and they tried to find it 10 years before, but then they just made it in time. And we said, so why are you here? And they said, well, 3 of my ancestors died in the tragedy. And we said, wow, gosh, we've been walking for a week and like 70 miles. And then we've arrived just at this window where you are standing in front of this tiny monument and no one else is around in the village or the churchyard. And we said, have you heard about the song? And they said, no. And then, so we actually got to sing the song back to the bloodline effectively. And we'd thought we were taking the song back to the place, like Heart Lake Bridge itself. When we got there, the song being given back to the bridge wasn't exactly like where the actual tragedy had happened. That didn't seem to be the most important thing. It was the most important meeting was this couple. And I think we walked away from it and we just said, what on earth happened there? I mean, that was extraordinary. And yeah, you can read meaning into it and say, yeah, well, it's just, you're over egging the coincidence. But it was meaningful enough for us to think, well, we've done a narrative, and this narrative taking the song to where it comes from, and the journey has rewarded us with this incredible coincidence. And then that shifted our thinking about normal walking and normal hiking, thinking, well, if we turn it into a narrative journey, and the kind of structure of a pilgrimage, more the idea of you start with intention, you go to a destination, then you walk with it. Then these kinds of synchronicities and coincidences happen on a regular basis. I mean, Will had been walking for like 10 months, 9 months, big long journeys, and the concentration of synchronicity wasn't as high in those longer journeys than in a week where there was a clear narrative. And it's just bizarre,
It's bizarre, but it's also it makes you feel quite euphoric. I think those synchronicities, there's something going on there. I don't know what, but it just makes me really exhilarated.
I'm just so grateful that one doesn't have to prove it scientifically, that it just means what it means to you. And then that, if that's enough to drive, well, in our case, it drove the the generation of the charity, and then sort of, the idea of pilgrimage. So it was, yeah, I think it will happen, but it won't always happen, but it's very special when it does.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're getting to, we've been speaking for an hour. I don't know, how are you doing, Jini?
Yeah, I'm okay. I think maybe close to coming to a natural.
Okay, fine. Well, let's just see if there's anything else. I mean, I think we've talked about a lot of things. Oh yeah, one thing. This is just an idea. The spirituality of I don't know if there's a way that you can. It's obviously got a brand, but this Glastonbury spirituality there is something which there's a kernel of some kind of identity going on there that it's very broad in many respects. Does it feel like you to be the kind of, is it just a 60s hangover, or is it actually the future of where potentially this kind of movement's going? Or I think it's very important. It's very different to anywhere else I've been, the Glastonbury feeling, and the kinds of people that are there, and the kinds of things that are talked about, the stories, the myths, and the things that are acceptable to talk about they're like nowhere else. Is it okay to just talk about like the Zodiac or Arthur and Excalibur in a kind of serious way? And I just wonder, like, it feels very special because of that, and I love it. But I just wonder, it's silly to talk, is that the future? But it feels there's something going on there there's a kind of voice that wants to come out.
Yeah, it did feel very inclusive. It has a very inclusive feel to it, in that all comers are welcome, and you can bring whatever your beliefs are to the place.
Yeah. Anywhere else like that you found?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of
it. Yeah,
anything.
no, it's I think it is pretty unique. So I was just interested in that. So okay, let's I'm just gonna look at any more questions we have. No, I think that's it. So, well, I'm not really sure how to round off this kind of particular conversation. It's kind of been quite meandering, and it's like, in a sense, there wasn't an obvious destination. Even the way the book finishes itself, it just sort of.
Well, that's what they say about pilgrimage. The destination, the journey, is the destination.
Yeah, in a way. Although, actually, one of the things I did learn is that I'm going to schedule more time being in the destination itself. Like spend 2 or 3 days in Lindisfarne or Iona rather than just one. Don't just arrive and then leave. And I think that's one thing I've learned is, that these places are amazing to explore on their own grounds. So it's a bit of both.
Yes.
So, yeah. Well, thank you. You've made me, through reading the book, reconnect with so many of the special feelings and ways of being in the landscape that have driven my passion for the British Pilgrimage Trust. So I think you must have done it for many other people. So
thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and it's made me want to join one of your walks.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, let's, I don't know how to finish this exactly, but may everyone out there who wants to discover the magical in the landscape feel fully permitted to just have a play.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's a nice Christmas present too.
Yeah, let's do it together. Yeah, this is a great book. And Robert Macfarlane says, "What a wonderful book Wanderland is," and compares you to Roger Deakins. So you must be doing something right. Anyway, okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jini.
Yeah, bye.
Bye-bye.